Hey, my kids. So, you've been hearing me talk about this Western Canon project for like a year now, and I realized I didn't share about the books that I've already read on here that I think are really important. And so, this project all started because I was reading through Harold Bloom's Western Canon and realized I needed to read more of these classics. And I also like him because it's definitely not just from the West, it's world literature. But I'm going to go through his list of the Western Canon in the back from the beginning of what he calls the theocratic age through the end of the aristocratic age, which is kind of like early Renaissance kind of thing. And I'm just going to go over the books that I've read and that I can talk to you about why I think they're important for me to read in case you want to read them when you see this in 20 to 40 years. So, the first book is the Holy Bible, and I do think everyone should read through the Bible at least once. And even if not that, at least do the picture book version of the Bible. It's that comic book version that we have here that's really well done. It's a way to get the stories, and the stories are really important. But there's also a lot of new translations that are worth looking at, and I've done other videos about them. As well as the Apocrypha / Gnostic Gospels and Nag Hammadi Gospels are really great to get through because there's so many different takes on what early Christianity was. But also from ancient India, though, of course, there is the Mahabharata, which, as you know, I think is one of the most amazing pieces of wisdom literature ever done. The longest single epic poem done by humans ever. It's 10 volumes. It's like this long. And within it is the Bhagavad Gita in book 6. And so if you don't read anything else, at least read the Gita because it is one of the pinnacles of human wisdom literature. Then from the ancient Greeks, of course, you have the Iliad and the Odyssey. Those are both worth reading, and they're not that hard to read. There's some really good modern translations. There's a new feminist one I just saw, but there's a reason Homer's influence is so overarching. But as equally as important as Homer, or at least almost, is Hesiod. And Hesiod wrote something called the Theogony, which is the birth of the gods. And so it goes over how the different gods and goddesses were born. I think everybody kind of had their own different version of that, but Hesiod's was one of the very first recorded. And he was at the end of that transition from the oral storytelling to the writing down of storytelling. And so really beyond him is a whole bunch of unnamed storytellers, and he's just the last one who we finally get to hear from. But he gives a sense of what storytelling was in the 5 to 10 to 50,000 years before that. Also from the Greeks, Pindar. The Odes of Pindar. So I started this year because of Harold Bloom. I just had heard Pindar's name. I looked up the Odes, and they're actually quite short. You can get through them pretty quickly if you want to. But Pindar was this poet who got paid by the winners of the Olympics or the Pythian Games or these other sports contests to write an ode about the winner. So there's interesting stuff about the sports at the time, but also he writes about what it's like to rule a kingdom or to be a good person. And there's the language and the metaphors. It's just beautiful. And there's all these little words of wisdom in there. They're so worth reading. I'm almost finished with them, and I just think, they're right here. I've typed out a couple of them, in fact, and this translation by Verity is quite good. Oxford World's Classics are almost always worth getting. So Pindar's Odes are really cool. Then for the old Greek playwrights, unfortunately, there's only a couple dozen plays left from the Greeks of the hundreds that we know were written. But the very top of the list is Aeschylus. If you're going to read any Greek playwright, Aeschylus is, when I hear the people who know what they're talking about talk about it, Aeschylus is the great Greek playwright. And, any of his, Zoroaster, the Prometheus Bound, are amazing. Sophocles, Oedipus, and Antigone are always worth reading. And Aristophanes is a lot more fun. And so a lot of his stuff gets brought down too, like the birds, the frogs, Lysistria, withholding sex to stop a war. Then my two favorite historians for sure are Herodotus, who wrote the histories. And that one is really fun because Herodotus should travel. That was actually my first TikTok video when I first started making videos so I could talk to you kids about why I'm making these. Herodotus was the first person I chose. And they're just so much fun and also a great look at the ancient world. As well as Thucydides, which was Kurt Vonnegut's favorite ancient historian. But he writes about the Peloponnesian Wars, and it's a great look at statecraft. You have a lot more primary data about how people are deciding what to do when you have this great big invader coming in. Plutarch's Lives are a lot of fun to read. Aesop's Fables, of course, are worth reading, as are Lucian's satires. And Callimachus is fun. He was one of the earliest homoerotic writers of all time. And then from the Romans, the main Roman I think that is important is Lucretius, The Way Things Are. And he was an early proponent of the atomist theory, but also the unknowability of things. He might be called the first great cynic scientist. Lucretius is really a fascinating writer. And then there's also Catullus. Wait, Catullus is the gay one, not Callimachus. Yeah. And then Virgil's the Aeneid. Okay, I didn't love Virgil, but it's really important to know, especially if you're going to get into things like Milton later on. I mean, he's one of the most important Romans, not to say I loved him. The Roman I love the most is Ovid's Metamorphoses. It is just like very, very modern, especially because he's playing with the Greek myths and how things get transformed. But the Greeks, the Greeks have been around for, hundreds and thousands of years at that point. So he's like, it's almost like a modern take on an old universe, like what you might see in like a modern superhero thing where they completely twist some of the storylines. And there's a great new feminist translation that Auntie Diana gave me from Stephanie McCarter. That's really well done. Then you have Apollosius, the Golden Ass, which is a really fun one about magic. And then from the Arabic, you have, of course, the Quran. And I've already gone over the one great translation of the Quran that you can read through. I'm still working through it myself. The Book of 1001 Nights, there's a great new feminist translation of that we have started to do together as a family. So a little early. I do think Beowulf is worth reading. Maybe just because I read it when I was in high school, but I really enjoyed it. And now that was the end of the theocratic age. Now we're getting the aristocratic age. So the early stuff, Dante's Divine Comedy, is amazing. I have so many different versions of it. And I just think it's so well done. There's a great graphic novel version too of a Reagan era like punk scene of Dante's Divine Comedy. The Boccaccio's Decameron is a bunch of great stories. Petrarch's poems, I don't know if the poems matter, but Petrarch was so important for being like the first humanist in a lot of ways. Machiavelli's The Prince is important to read. And then, my buddy Bruno, The Expulsion of the Triumphant Beast. I have my whole memory palace Bruno stuff over here. Basically, this book is actually kind of a memory palace of the stuff that he cares about. And I think Bruno, burned at the stake, genius, over the top thinker. Some people say the inventor of infinity, of like the philosophical idea that infinity really exists. Bruno is such a hero. Then you have Don Quixote by Cervantes. And I am working through this beautiful edition, and it is by Ormsby. Ormsby's translation of Don Quixote is really well done. I really like his little footnotes in it. He's kind of snarky at that, which I always enjoy. Gotta read Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. So funny, so fucking funny. Sir Thomas More's Utopia is another important one, as is Spenser's The Fairy Queen. I like because I like learning about the history of the supernormal and such, but it is rather thick. Marlowe is also good. You got to read his Faustus. Read some Ben Jonson, read some Francis Bacon. Oh, Robert Burton's The Anatomy of Melancholy. Yeah, I have. It is. I've not finished it. It is a giant book, and it's everything that this obsessive, I think probably manic depressive guy thought about the idea of sadness, like the supernatural causes, the natural causes. Like it's amazing, and there's a reason he gets quoted all the time because he said everything. So Burton, Andrew Marvell's poems, I have read them. They're a little sugary. Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels, that satirist, Gulliver, Swift is trying to say something very deep and cutting about how the world works, and I'm here for it. I am reading Milton's Paradise Lost for this, and it is so good. I love Moby Dick, and it turns out Moby Dick is greatly based on Milton's Paradise Lost and the Bible. So now I'm finally reading Milton. I'm like, this is just fantastic stuff. Boswell's Life of Johnson. I actually listened to that when Sophia, when you were really little. I remember listening on the way to work. And it was amazing. His obsessiveness about this great soul, Samuel Johnson, is really cool. Even though Johnson himself, his writing is kind of forgotten. Daniel Defoe, Robinson Crusoe is a fine adventure novel, but A Journal of the Plague Year is what's really fascinating because he was like a generation out from the last great outbreak of the bubonic plague, and he was one of, you could call, the earliest journalists. And so he went back and he tried to figure out what people happened to people during the plague, how they reacted. And I had read it before COVID, and people reacted just like that. Nothing changed at all. It's a really important one to see, how people are going to be. Lawrence Stern, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy. Gentlemen, God, this is a funny book. This is such a funny book. I'm still finishing listening to this one as well. But he just goes on and on. It's him telling the story of his life, but he takes 2.5 volumes just to get to his birth. It's wild, just these long directions. It's like having an uncle who just goes off on all these different tangents, but it's really funny. Montaigne is an amazing thinker. I don't know quite what to recommend besides the essays, but there's so many essays. Then Rabelais, Gargantua and Pantagruel. Well, you're French. I mean, you'll grow up with these, but it also is a secret ode to hashish, which not many people realize, so it's really important for my work. But it is so funny. It is so funny and so over the top. There is Voltaire, Zadig, and Candide are really important pieces of work. I really like Voltaire. I think he's a great thinker. Diderot's Rameau's Nephew is an interesting philosophical work. And Goethe. Goethe's Faust Part 2 especially is seen as one of the pinnacles of literature for a reason. And I'm just working through a really nice little edition of it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's my Arabian Nights, too. So, yeah, this is Bayard Taylor's version of, which is especially great to me because he's the first great cannabis writer of the United States, and then he did this very finicky literary translation of Goethe, which is a lot of fun. Oh, and also for the Arabian Nights, Yasmin Seal. This is it. This is the best thing I've ever found of the Arabian Nights, and it collects some other tales that you don't find in other things, as well as a bunch of great images. For Goethe, also The Sorrows of Young Werther. Just be careful of reading that one because it's about a tragic boy killing himself for love, and so it led to a whole bunch of people doing that. And also William Meister's Apprenticeship by Goethe kind of is a look at his young life as well. And that is the end of the aristocratic age. And I'll end with the first one from the democratic age. And maybe I can go on with these if you want. But Alessandro Mazzoni's The Betrothed. I read that because it was the first one in the democratic age that caught my eye in this book. It is so good. It is in Italy during bread riots. It's like I think the War and Peace of Italy. Like everyone in Italy apparently knows it. And it's about two lovers separated by a guy who wants to hook up with the girl, a lord, and during the time of a plague outbreak and bread riots, and it's just so relatable and such good storytelling. You just care so much, and the writing's great. And he's a little bit like making little sly jokes on the side, and Zoni is really a great writer. So yeah, there's some of the first books in the Western Canon that mattered to me, and hopefully that'll help you find someone that you like. And for all of you out there watching, if you have any questions on translations or anything I said, just let me know.